In the last 72 hours, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has launched not only a military escalation in Gaza, but a diplomatic offensive against three of Israel's closest Western allies, Britain, France, and Canada. And his language has been incendiary, even by his own standards. According to the press, he's accused Keir Starmer, Emmanuel Macron, and Mark Carney of siding with Hamas and, by implication, abetting terrorism. This is not merely a row over humanitarian aid, it's a full-blown standoff that threatens the cohesion of the Western Bloc on the Israel-Gaza war. And the immediate spark was a joint statement from London, Paris, and Ottawa demanding an end to Israel's military offensive, the lifting of the blockade on humanitarian aid, and a credible commitment to a two-state solution. And this came days after the murder of two Israeli embassy staff in Washington, an horrific anti-Semitic crime now being politicized by the Israeli government. And rather than simply condemn the act, Netanyahu chose to link it rhetorically to the Free Palestine movement and, by extension, to the calls from European capitals for restraint. In a video statement, Netanyahu fumed that these leaders were being thanked by mass murderers, rapists, baby killers, and kidnappers, an astonishing conflation of diplomacy with complicity. He accused them of emboldening Hamas and declared their proposals a reward for murder. France's Foreign Minister, Jean-Noël Barrot, didn't mince his words in his rebuttal. He described Netanyahu's remarks as absurd and slanderous, stating unequivocally that France supports Israel's right to exist and defend itself and condemns anti-Semitism wherever it appears. But, and this is crucial, France also insists that Hamas must be disarmed and that the Palestinian people must have a political future. Barrot's report points to the growing frustration in Europe with Netanyahu's refusal to distinguish between Hamas and the civilian population of Gaza, or between criticism of Israeli policy and anti-Semitism. Britain's position too has hardened. Keir Starmer supported Israel's initial right to self-defence after the 7th of October attacks, but the situation has changed. The Foreign Secretary David Lammy suspended talks on a new UK-Israel trade deal last week, citing monstrous statements by Israeli ministers about purifying Gaza. The UK has also placed sanctions on violent settlers, and the rhetoric has changed, like Luke Pollard, the UK's Armed Forces Minister, explicitly condemned the embassy shooting as anti-Semitic, but also reiterated Britain's support for international humanitarian law and a massive aid push into Gaza. This is not just a diplomatic spat, it's a rupture in the moral, strategic alliance that underpins Western support for Israel. Netanyahu's accusation that Macron, Starmer, and Carney are siding with Hamas, is not only inflammatory, it's politically desperate. At home, Netanyahu is facing plummeting approval ratings. Most Israelis now believe his main aim is staying in power and not rescuing hostages or securing a military victory. He is under fire over the October the 7th security failures, the famine warnings in Gaza, and corruption scandals tied to the Qatargate affair. Internationally, even the United Arab Emirates, Israel's most reliable Arab ally, is pressuring him to allow food trucks through on the Jewish Sabbath, invoking Donald Trump's insistence that starvation in Gaza is unacceptable. When even the Trump camp is urging restraint, you know the tide is turning. There's a moral and political cost to Netanyahu's language. By suggesting that Western leaders are enabling Hamas, he fuels the polarization of the debate. He undermines support for Israel not only abroad, but also within his own country, where hostage families are demanding answers, not slogans, and there are consequences. France has refused to be drawn into reciprocal hostilities, but insists that aid must flow and political solutions must be pursued. The UK is facing its most strained relationship with Israel in decades. Canada, under Mark Carney, has taken a more assertive line on international law than many anticipated. This is a standoff between diplomacy and dogma. Netanyahu is betting that international pressure will fold before he does, but Macron, Starmer, and Carney, each for their own reasons, are signalling that there are limits to Western patience, particularly when the war descends into carnage. And there's no defined end, no political horizon, a campaign with growing civilian casualties. The tragedy is that Israel's real security interests and the need to defeat Hamas are being drowned out by a prime minister more concerned with outflanking his domestic rivals than with securing a sustainable peace. Netanyahu may think he's isolating Hamas. In reality, he risks isolating Israel.